Welcome to the world of science fiction, Neon's Alien. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Neon's Alien universe. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with light, sound, and pride. Dozens of powerful alien leaders sat in shining seats made of crystal and steel. Some had glowing skin, others floated instead of walking. Many wore tall robes, symbols of their proud worlds. Their children stood beside them, beautiful, tall, perfect. Then the doors opened, every head turned. A human walked in. His name was Jaron Holt. He was tall, simple, dressed in an old Earth military coat. But it wasn't him they stared at. It was the child holding his hand. The girl was small, quiet. Her skin was pale with a slight purple tint. Her eyes were two different colors, one blue, one silver. Small horns curled from her forehead, and a strange shimmer followed her every step. Some whispered, others laughed softly behind gloved hands. That's his daughter? She's not even fully human. She looks broken. Jaron heard every word. But he didn't stop walking. His face stayed calm, his eyes straight. The girl, Leary, walked beside him, her small fingers holding tight to his glove. Her heart beat fast. She heard the whispers, too. She had always heard them. They reached their seat near the back of the chamber. It was the lowest rank. Humans were still new in the council, barely accepted. The council leader, a tall alien with 6 golden eyes, stood and raised a hand. Let the session begin. Today we speak of new life, young minds, and the future of the galaxy. One by one, the alien leaders stepped forward to show off their children. A child from the Valari race lifted a metal cube using only her mind. Applause. A boy from the Zyth cracked a secret code faster than any machine. More applause. Then came the words Jaron had expected and dreaded. Let us also witness what the human has brought. The room fell quiet. All eyes turned to Leary. The council leader looked down. Is this child yours? Yes, Jaron answered calmly. She is my daughter. Your blood? Jaron shook his head. I adopted her. Murmurs. From which world? Her mother was Kithari. Died during a mining collapse, no family left. A cold laugh came from one of the side benches. A tall alien woman with green skin said aloud, You call this mixed breed a daughter? Leary flinched, her horns lowered, Jaron's jaw clenched. She is quiet, another alien noted. No talent, no show? Jaron looked down at Leary. She looked up at him, afraid. Her hands were shaking. He knelt beside her and whispered, Do you want to leave? Leary's voice was small. Are they right? Am I ugly? Jaron placed a hand on her shoulder. No, they just don't understand you. Not yet. She nodded. Her hands still trembled. He stood and faced the council. She's not here to perform. She's here to learn. The green-skinned woman laughed again. Learn what? How to embarrass the entire human race? Silence. Jaron didn't argue. He just took Leary's hand, and they returned to their seat. Later, when the meeting ended, they walked back to the transport ship parked outside the shining tower. Leary sat quietly, looking out the window. She didn't cry. She just stayed silent. Did I make you look weak today? She asked softly. Jaron looked at her. No, you made me proud. But I didn't do anything. He smiled. Exactly. You stayed calm. You faced all those stares. You kept walking. She blinked. That's enough? For today, yes. And tomorrow, we start proving them wrong. That night, Leary sat in her small room inside the ship. She opened her old tablet and began to draw something in the air. A design, a map, lines of numbers and light. She didn't show it to anyone. Not yet. But it pulsed with power. Her power. The galaxy didn't know it yet. But they had just mocked the one child who might one day save them all. The stars outside the ship blinked like slow fireflies in the dark. Inside, Leary sat cross-legged on the cold floor of her room. She had no toys, no mirrors, just a small tablet and a pile of scrap parts Jaren had let her keep from old tech dumps. She didn't need much. Her mind was always busy. While others had laughed at her face, Leary had noticed the cracked lights in the council ceiling. She had counted how many security drones were active. She had memorized the entry codes on each panel she walked past, because her brain didn't just think. It heard. It felt. It read patterns. That night she opened the tablet and began building again. A 3D blueprint glowed in the air. Tiny numbers floated around it like fireflies. Jaren walked in quietly and leaned against the door. "You're up late," he said. Leary didn't look away. "I fixed the translator loop in your ship's engine. It was wasting fuel." Jaren raised an eyebrow. "You fixed the fuel modulator?" She nodded. It was off by 0.0037%. Jaren walked over, kneeling beside her. "Show me." She turned the tablet toward him. The device showed a perfect schematic of the ship's inner core, with real-time flow updates and a full energy-saving plan. Jaren let out a slow breath. "You did this from memory?" "Yes." He looked at her, not as the world saw her, but as she truly was. Brilliant, sharp, focused, and completely unnoticed by the people who laughed at her. "You know," he said, "when I was your age, I could barely figure out how to boil water." Leary smiled faintly. "You still burn rice sometimes." He laughed. "That's true." She hesitated. "I don't look like them." "No," he replied softly. "You don't. You look like you. That's even better." The next morning, Leary stayed quiet during breakfast. She held the tablet tight in her hands. Finally, she spoke. "Why do they hate me?" Jaren paused. "Because they fear what they don't understand." "Why don't they try to understand me?" Jaren looked her in the eye. "Because they never expect greatness from someone who looks different." Leary stared at the table for a long time, then said, "Then we have to show them." That day, Jaren made a call to the council's youth event coordinator. "I want to enter Leary into the open trial," he said. There was a pause. The voice on the other end laughed. "You're joking, right? She's not even..." "She's ready," Jaren interrupted. "More than any of them." The voice grew cold. "Fine, she can enter, but don't cry when she fails." Jaren hung up. He looked at Leary. "You don't have to do this, kid." She straightened her back. "Yes, I do." The open trial was 1 week away. Leary didn't train in public. She didn't need cheering crowds or flashy tools. She practiced in silence. She took apart the navigation console from Jaren's backup ship and rebuilt it to be 3 times faster. She cracked a puzzle from the Zyth learning core in under 7 minutes. She listened to music from alien worlds and memorized the math, hidden inside their beats. Jaren watched from a distance. No one else saw what he saw. They saw twisted horns and mismatched eyes. He saw a miracle in motion. On the night before the trial, Jaren brought her a gift. It was a small headband made of woven copper and thread. "It's not for hiding," he said. "It's for honoring." She took it gently. "I've never worn anything pretty." "You've always been beautiful," he said. "But now, you're ready to shine." That night, as she fell asleep, Leary whispered softly to herself, "They said I was a mistake, but I was just waiting for the right test." And far away in the council's core tower, a group of elite alien parents sat around a large table. One of them leaned forward and sneered. "The human's daughter is entering the trial." Another replied, "Good." The galaxy could use a laugh. But no one at that table knew that soon they wouldn't be laughing, they would be watching in awe. The sky above the council tower was a shining dome of lights and flags. Hundreds of beings from different planets had gathered. Cameras floated in the air, broadcasting the event across the galaxy. The open trial had begun. This was not just a competition, it was a show. The best and brightest children of the council worlds were here, to prove their species were smarter, faster, stronger. At the back of the giant hall, a quiet figure stepped off the human shuttle. Leary. Her small hands clutched the copper thread headband Jaren had given her. She wore no jewels, no glowing robe, no sponsor crest, only quiet eyes. Jaren walked beside her. "You sure about this?" he asked gently. Leary nodded. She had no more fear left. Only fire. The first round began. The Valari girl used her mind to bend light into shapes. Everyone clapped. The Scythe boy solved a 10-layer encryption in just under a minute. The judges nodded. Then came Leary's turn. She stepped forward. Whispers filled the hall. "That's her. She doesn't even look awake. She's a mixed blood, isn't she?" Jaren heard them all. He stayed silent. Leary placed a small data disk on the table. "I'll solve the level 5 gravity puzzle," she said softly. The judges blinked. "That test is for graduates, not children." "I understand," Leary replied. The lead judge sighed. "Very well. Begin." The screen lit up. Dozens of floating tiles spun in the air, covered in alien numbers and physics symbols, each one connected to the others. The goal: form a stable gravity field using logic and pattern recognition. The Scythe boy had failed it last year. Leary took one look and began. Her fingers danced over the controls. She moved the tiles like a painter brushing color on a canvas. Her eyes moved fast. Her mind worked faster. 1 minute passed. The audience leaned forward. 2 minutes. A ripple of silence spread through the judges. 3 minutes. The screen beeped. Complete. Stable gravity field formed. 0 errors. Full score. No one clapped. They were too stunned. The lead judge cleared his throat. That was accurate and fast, unusual. A voice shouted from the crowd. "She memorized the answer." "She must have cheated." Leary turned slowly. "I've never seen this puzzle before," she said calmly. "But I felt the solution. The gravity waves were out of rhythm. I listened and moved until they hummed together." One judge leaned in. "You heard gravity?" She nodded. "I don't know how not to." More tests followed, each one harder than the last. Language decoding, circuit logic, deep code writing. Leary passed every single one. Not just passed, broke records. The audience started whispering new things now. "She's gifted. She's scary good. Who is this child?" Backstage, Jaren sat with his hands folded, barely breathing. The council's media drones surrounded him. "Is this really your daughter?" one reporter asked. "Yes," he said proudly. "Mixed blood?" Another pressed. Jaren looked directly into the lens. "She's not a mistake. She's the future." The final test came. It wasn't logic or code, it was creation. Build something useful using only broken parts. Contestants stepped forward with toolkits, blueprints, fancy gloves. Leary stepped up with her bare hands and a single crystal battery. She sat on the floor quietly. People watched. She didn't draw, didn't ask for help. She just built. Her fingers moved fast, focused, fluid. In 20 minutes, she stood up. On the table sat a floating orb, spinning gently, humming. "What does it do?" a judge asked. Leary touched the top. The orb projected a glowing sphere. "This is a star map of the next 10 years of asteroid movement in the Drell cluster." Another judge blinked. "That cluster hasn't been charted yet." "It has now," Leary said. This time the audience did clap. Some stood. Even the reporters couldn't hide their shock. One whispered, "Maybe humanity brought something special after all." Later, as the scores were displayed, Leary's name rose to the very top, above the Valari, above the Scythe, above every perfect child. Leary Holt, first place. She walked off the stage and into Jaren's arms. "You did it," he said. "No," she whispered, smiling. "We did." High in the council seats, the same alien leaders who mocked her now sat in silence, but in their eyes was fear, because the child they called ugly had just changed the game, and she was just getting started. The lights in the council tower had dimmed. The event was over, but the whispers had not stopped. Leary Holt's name still glowed at the top of the leaderboard, her quiet face appearing on every hollow screen across the star systems. Some called her a genius. Others, a miracle. But not everyone was happy, especially not Counselor Vren Thask, the one whose daughter had placed fourth. He stared at the glowing screen in his private chamber, his long fingers tightening into fists. A human girl with twisted horns, he hissed. Mocking our bloodline? In front of the galaxy? His aide stood silently nearby. Vren's voice was ice. Teach her fear. Make sure she doesn't return tomorrow. That night, Leary couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of their guest room, hugging her knees. Outside, flying drones passed by the council towers. The stars blinked gently in the sky. Jaren entered, holding 2 mugs. Warm berry milk, he said. You need it. Leary smiled faintly and took the cup. Do they really like me now? Some do, he said. Some never will. She sipped slowly. I don't care if they like me, but I want them to respect what I do. You're earning that, Jaren said proudly. With every step. She looked at him. Do you think it will last? Jaren paused, then answered honestly. Not, unless we fight to protect it. Later that night, while Jaren slept, Leary got up to check the hallway sensor. Something felt wrong. Her fingers hovered over the control panel when she heard movement. Fast, quiet, heavy, then darkness. The hallway lights cut out. The door lock hissed. She stepped back as a tall shadow moved inside. A large alien boy, almost grown, stepped through, face covered in a dark visor. On his hand was a stun glove glowing blue. You made my family look weak, he growled. Leary's heart pounded. I didn't mean, you're just a freak, a mistake. He swung at her. She ducked just in time, the stun glove missing her head by inches. She ran, down the hallway, around the corner, to the back lab. She slammed the door shut and knocked it, but the lock wasn't strong. He pounded on the door once, twice. Open it, he shouted, or I'll break it down. Leary backed away, looking around the lab. Tools, wires, parts, and an old defense drone on the wall. She grabbed it. By the time the attacker burst through, she had rewired it. The drone lit up and fired a low shockwave. The boy screamed and dropped, body twitching. Leary stood over him, panting, her hands shaking but still holding the control box. Moments later, guards arrived. Jaren came running behind them, half-dressed, eyes wide. Leary? She turned to him and burst into tears. The attacker was dragged away. Counselor Vren was called in for questioning, but he denied everything. He acted alone, Vren said coldly. No connection to me. The council leader looked at him for a long moment and said nothing. The next day, Jaren walked into the main chamber, but not quietly. This time he stood at the center podium. He placed a small hollow tablet down. A blue light flickered and security footage played. Leary, running, the boy, breaking in, the attack, the escape, the defense, all recorded by hallway cams. Gasps filled the room. She was attacked? She's just a child. Who sent him? Jaren's voice was calm but firm. My daughter won your tests. She earned your praise, and within hours, someone tried to silence her. He looked directly at Vren Thask. I don't ask for pity. I don't ask for gifts. I ask for safety, for fairness, for dignity. He held up the tablet. She earned this, not with power, not with money, but with mind and heart. The chamber was quiet. Then, slow clapping. One counselor stood, then another, then more. Counselor Vren remained seated, silent. But in his eyes, rage burned. He had lost something, He could never regain control. After the meeting, Leary stepped out into the hallway. She walked past others, some who once laughed at her, who now bowed their heads or stepped aside. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She walked like someone who had finally realized her strength. Later that evening, Jaren brought her a new set of tools. "Next time," he said, "build a drone that bites." Leary giggled. "Already working on it." The day after the attack, the galaxy didn't go quiet. It woke up. News of the attempted sabotage spread faster than any speech ever could. Images of Leary, standing tall, wounded but brave, flooded the hollow channels. Footage of her winning the trial was replayed again and again, but now with a new title. The girl they called a mistake who outsmarted the galaxy. On the dusty mining planet of Telros 9, a young girl with rust-stained skin and broken boots watched the screen. "She looks like me," the girl whispered to her mother, and for the first time her mother smiled. "Yes, and she's not afraid anymore. So maybe you don't have to be either." In a school on Ishkareth where only the perfect-blooded children were praised, a quiet boy with missing scales and stuttering speech raised his hand. "Leary Holt is my hero," he said. "She speaks like I think." Some laughed, but others didn't, because something had changed. A spark had caught fire. Back on the Council's main world, Leary stood in her quarters, staring at the screen. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. "You made me believe I matter. They said I was too different. You proved them wrong. Please don't stop." Leary turned to Jaren, wide-eyed. "They're listening," she whispered. He smiled. "They've always needed someone to speak first." That evening, the Council called a special session. They wanted to calm the media storm, hide the embarrassment, regain control. So they invited Leary to speak at the Youth Assembly, a stage never before given to any human child, let alone one like her. They expected her to smile politely and thank the Council. They were wrong. The grand hall was packed. Thousands in person. Billions watching. Leary stepped onto the stage wearing a simple gray dress and her copper thread headband. She looked so small beside the massive podium, but when she spoke, her voice reached every corner. "I know what you see when you look at me," she began softly. "You see my eyes, my horns, my skin, my silence." She paused. "Some of you laughed, some whispered, some told me I didn't belong." Her voice grew stronger. "But I do, and so do many others like me." She lifted a small silver cube, a hologram projector. It showed faces, dozens, hundreds, all different, all alien, all beautiful, in strange, rare, imperfect ways. These are the children who never got a seat, never got a test, never got a chance. Leary stepped back, letting the images hover above her. "They don't need your pity. They need your permission to rise." The room was silent. She looked directly at the Council leaders. "You say this galaxy stands for unity. Prove it." Outside the chamber, social feeds exploded. "Leary Holt just rewrote history. The half-blood child who speaks for the whole. Are we ready to change?" The next morning, statues were defaced. Schools demanded reforms. Debates spread through news halls and city streets. And on quiet backwater planets where children had once lowered their heads in shame, now they walked straighter, because someone with twisted horns and mismatched eyes had dared to raise hers. First, later that day, Jaren and Leary sat in the quiet garden behind the Council dome. She played with a flower that grew in the cracks. "Did I do too much?" she asked. Jaren shook his head. "You did just enough." She looked at the sky. So many voices are rising now. Jaren leaned back on the bench. "You didn't just win a trial, Leary. You opened a door." In a dark hall far from the garden, Councillor Vren Thask watched the speech on repeat. His lips curled. "The galaxy listens to her now," he muttered. His aide shifted nervously. "What do we do?" "We wait," Vren said. "And when the cheering fades, we remind them of their place." But deep down, even Vren knew the old ways had been shaken. The quiet ones were standing and they had found their voice. The council tower, once a place of quiet power, now buzzed with noise. Protests outside, reporters shouting, messages flashing. Across every wall. Let them in. Honor the hybrid. Truth has horns. Inside, the council chamber was no longer united. What once looked like a circle of strength now looked like a room split down the middle. On one side, Counselor Frenthas sat with arms crossed, his face like stone. "These are children," he said sharply, "not leaders." That girl's speech was touching, yes, but emotional. Not logical. Others beside him nodded. "She's only one voice," said a silver-scaled diplomat. "We should not change galactic law for a child." But on the other side, voices rose, louder. "She is not only one voice," said a soft-spoken scholar from the Lithari system. "She is the first voice, and there are millions behind her." "She outscored every child in the trial," another added. "She earned her place." A third stood up. "She didn't just win. She stood tall while your children tried to tear her down." In the center, the council speaker raised a hand. "We must vote," she said. "Two decisions stand before us. First, shall we open a seat in the Intergalactic Science Exchange for Leary Holt? Second, shall we begin the review of admission for all hybrid children across council worlds?" A quiet gasp ran through the chamber. This wasn't just about Leary anymore, it was about everyone like her. Outside, Leary sat on the steps of the tower with Jaren. She wore a plain cloak, her headband tucked into her pocket. She didn't feel like a hero. She just felt tired. "I didn't ask for all this," she said quietly. "I know," Jaren said. "But sometimes those who don't ask are the ones who deserve it most." She looked up at the sky. "What if they say no?" He smiled. "Then we make them regret it." Inside, the vote began. Each council member placed their hand over a glowing disc. Blue for yes, red for no. One by one, the colors appeared on the massive dome overhead. The gallery watched in silence. Leary and Jaren sat together in a small viewing room. A screen floated before them. Red, blue, blue, blue. It was close. Too close. Leary held her breath. Then the final disc lit up. Blue. The speaker stood. "By majority vote, we welcome Leary Holt into the Intergalactic Science Exchange." Applause erupted in the chamber, but she wasn't done. "And by second vote, the council will begin review of hybrid admission status across all systems." More applause. Tears filled Jaren's eyes. Leary didn't speak. She just covered her mouth with her hands and closed her eyes. But not everyone clapped. Counselor Vren rose slowly. "This council moves too fast," he said coldly. "One child does, not prove a rule." "Then let her prove more," replied a voice across the chamber. Vren's eyes narrowed. "This vote may pass today," he said, "but tides change." He turned and walked out, his robe trailing behind like a storm cloud. That evening, Leary stood alone in the garden behind the tower. She looked up at the sky, different now. Not because the stars had changed, but because she had. Jaren stepped beside her. "Well," he said, "you're officially smarter than the whole council." She laughed quietly. "They'll expect more now." "Good," he said. "Give them more." The next day, a formal message arrived from the Science Exchange. Leary's name was on the list, at the very top. She was invited to join not as a guest, but as a lead junior researcher. No one her age had ever received that title, not in the history of the galaxy. And yet, as she packed her few things into a simple bag, she paused and looked at her reflection, her horns, her mismatched eyes, her strange, silver-blue skin for the first time. She didn't hide them. She didn't flinch. She smiled, because she knew something the council had finally realized. Power doesn't always come from perfection. Sometimes it comes from those brave enough to stand when everyone else looks away. The hall was quiet. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of respect. 1,000 officials, scholars, and leaders sat waiting inside the glowing auditorium of the Intergalactic Science Exchange. No laughter, No whispers, only focused eyes. All, waiting for one name, a voice echoed through the chamber. Now entering, junior researcher Leary Holt, human representative. The doors opened, and Leary walked in. She wore a simple dark blue coat stitched by hand. On her chest was the silver crest of the exchange, the youngest ever to wear it. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her horns were polished, shining with pride. Her mismatched eyes didn't look down this time. She looked forward, straight into history. In the front row, Jaren stood quietly. No words, just pride so deep, it made his chest ache. This was the same girl who once asked him if she was broken. Now, she stood tall while the galaxy watched. Leary walked to the podium. Behind her floated a model of her first project, a multi-species learning device that translated emotion as well as language. A tool designed to help misunderstood children across star systems communicate their feelings. Her voice rang clear. "Not long ago," she said, "many people looked at me and saw something ugly, something wrong. But that's not what I was. I was simply new." In a room far away, a child with blinking skin and sharp teeth watched her on a tiny screen. He sat up straighter. She looked like him, and she was winning. "I didn't want fame," Leary continued. "I only wanted space to grow. You gave me that." She paused. "And now I give it back." Behind her, a screen lit up, showing the names of the first planets approved for hybrid child outreach. Dozens of systems were already joining. For the first time, children who looked wrong would be invited into the halls of learning, invention, and respect. Leary stepped aside as the crowd stood. Every race, every rank. Applause thundered across the chamber, not because she looked like them, but because she had done something they couldn't. She stood when it was hardest to stand. After the ceremony, Leary returned to her room overlooking the city towers. Jaren waited by the window sipping tea. "You did it," he said. Leary sat beside him. "We did." She looked down at her hands. "I used to hide my fingers, my arms, my face." "I remember," Jaren said. "I thought if I looked different, I had to be different. Lesser. Wrong." She looked up. "But now I know better." Jaren nodded. "And now, they know too." The next morning, Leary received a message, short, simple, from someone unexpected. "Counselor Vren Thask, I was wrong. But change still frightens people like me. Please keep going, even if we don't clap." Leary stared at the words for a long time, then replied, "You don't have to clap. Just don't block the door when others try to walk through." Weeks passed, then months. Leary's designs began to change systems across the stars. Her face appeared in classrooms, on science stations, even inside old refugee colonies where forgotten children whispered her name. Leary Holt. A name that once meant mockery, now meant possibility. One day, a group of new students arrived at the science exchange. Small, strange, bright-eyed, every one of them different. Every one of them like she once was. Leary greeted each by name, and, before they entered the great hall, she bent slightly and whispered to them, "You don't have to become someone else to belong here. You just have to become yourself." And so the girl they once laughed at, the girl with mismatched eyes, the girl who stood alone, became the light for those still trying to find the door. And from across the galaxy, they came running.